Most people believe that respect is earned with words, arguments, time, but that's completely wrong. Respect, or the lack thereof, is decided in seconds, before the first sentence, before logic, before you even realize you're being evaluated. There's a silent, almost invisible moment where people look at you and make a brutal judgment. I respect this person, or I can ignore them. And the most dangerous part, you've probably already lost this game several times without even knowing it. Because nobody teaches you this. They tell you to be polite, to explain better, to try harder, but they ignore what really matters, how the human brain works in practice. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, always wins. And the reality is that respect isn't given to those who deserve it. It's given to those who transmit it. It may seem harsh, but the end justifies the means. And if you don't understand the signals you're sending in the first few seconds, you're handing over power without realizing it. Now think about it. How many times have you felt like you weren't taken seriously? That you had to over-explain yourself? That you were ignored, interrupted, or underestimated? This wasn't due to a lack of ability. It was due to a lack of understanding and control of these invisible micro-behaviors. And here's the point. This can be corrected. Not with motivation, but with awareness and strategy, because the moment you understand the game, you stop playing on autopilot. And when that happens, people can't explain why, but they start to see you differently. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now, not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. There's a moment that almost no one notices, but that decides practically everything. In the first few seconds of any interaction, before any word even makes sense, the human brain has already drawn a conclusion. It's fast, almost brutal. The amygdala assesses, is this person weak or dangerous? And the most curious thing is that this has nothing to do with what you say, but with what you transmit. A man who understands this begins to act differently. He doesn't enter a room trying to convince. He enters already internally decided. As Niccolo Machiavelli would say, politics is guided by reality, not by ideals. And the reality here is simple. You are being judged before you even open your mouth. Therefore, posture, gaze, and rhythm are more important than speech. A practical example, when entering a room, don't quicken your pace as if asking permission to exist. Slow down slightly, maintain a steady gaze, and silence any bodily anxiety. It seems small, but this detail completely changes how people perceive you. The end justifies the means, and in this case, the means is your non-verbal behavior. The game begins before the words are spoken, and whoever understands this is already winning. Now think about how many times someone has lost respect without even knowing why. It wasn't because of the argument, it was because of the energy. The primitive brain doesn't negotiate with logic. It reacts to signals, and signals of hesitation, restlessness, or need for approval are interpreted as weakness. A man who internalizes this begins to work on his presence as a strategy. He understands that better to be feared than loved doesn't mean being aggressive, but rather being solid, predictable in his firmness. Imagine a work meeting. While some speak quickly, laugh too much, or interrupt to be accepted, there is the one who observes first, speaks later, and maintains consistency. This man rarely needs to raise his voice. He applies, without realizing it, the logic of the appearance of virtue. He conveys control even when he is still processing the environment. And this generates automatic respect. Want to apply this today? Simple. In your next interaction, speak 20% slower than normal. This forces your brain to slow down and conveys dominance. Small adjustments, big effects, but there's an even deeper detail. All of this only works when it's not artificial, because the human brain also detects inconsistency. When someone tries to appear as something they're not, there's a subtle misalignment, and that generates distrust. Therefore, true power lies not in acting, but in developing a solid internal point of reference. Virtù and fortuna come into play precisely here. You control your action, virtù, but the environment reacts unpredictably, fortuna. So, instead of trying to directly control others' perception, you control what's within your reach, your presence, your breathing, your stability. A simple exercise. Before entering any environment, stop for 5 seconds and adjust your posture and breathing. This completely redefines your entrance, and it's at this point that a silent question begins to emerge. If all this happens even before speaking, what happens when someone starts to over-explain themselves? There's a silent pattern that destroys respect faster than a mistake. The need to explain oneself without being asked. It seems harmless, even polite. But in the primitive reading of the human brain, this sounds like a request for approval. And when someone asks for approval, they automatically place themselves in an inferior position. A man who understands the dynamics of power, as Machiavelli taught, knows that decisions based on real human nature are far more effective than good intentions. And human nature doesn't respect those who over-justify themselves. Imagine the scene. Someone arrives late and before any questions are even asked, begins to rattle off long, detailed, almost desperate explanations. What's being conveyed there isn't responsibility, it's insecurity. The end justifies the means, and in this case, the most effective means isn't explaining, it's taking responsibility firmly. A simple, "I'm late, let's continue," conveys far more control than a 5-minute speech trying to validate oneself. Now observe the opposite behavior. A man who understands the game doesn't feel the need to fill the silence. He speaks when necessary, and only enough. This creates a curious effect. People begin to project more value onto him than he himself tries to demonstrate. It's the logic of the appearance of virtue applied strategically. It's not about hiding mistakes, but about not diminishing oneself in the face of them. Better to be feared than loved. In this context, it means being respected for your emotional stability, not for your attempts to please. A practical example: if someone questions your decision, instead of going defensive, respond directly and concisely. Something like, "It was the best decision based on the scenario." And stop there. The silence that follows works in your favor. Those who talk too much compromise their own authority. Those who talk less maintain presence. And this has nothing to do with arrogance. It has to do with control. But there's a subtle trap here. Many people try to stop justifying themselves, but they do so artificially. And the result? They become too cold, stiff, or seem disconnected. This happens because internal dependence still exists. Only the form of expression has changed. The problem was never the speech itself, it was the need behind it. Calculated use of force in this case means knowing when to speak and when to simply not react. And this requires constant adaptability. A simple exercise: the next time you feel the urge to explain yourself, wait 3 seconds before speaking. That alone completely changes your response. You start to act, not react. And little by little, you realize something interesting. It's not just what you say that communicates value, it's the time you take to respond, and that's exactly where we enter an even more delicate point. There's an almost invisible detail that reveals more about you than any speech: the time it takes you to react. Most people live on autopilot. Someone provokes them, they respond immediately. Someone pressures them, they give in or defend themselves immediately. But here's the point: reacting too quickly communicates something dangerous: that you can be controlled. The primitive brain interprets this as emotional predictability, and emotional predictability is weakness. A man who understands the logic of Niccolo Machiavelli understands that politics is guided by reality, not by ideals. And the reality is that whoever controls the time controls the interaction. The end justifies the means, and in this game, the most powerful means is not the argument, it's the pause. A pause of 2 or 3 seconds before responding completely changes the dynamic. It breaks the expected pattern, generates tension, and above all, conveys dominance. Those who are not quick to react don't seem available to be manipulated. Now observe the behavior of someone who is emotionally reactive. They receive criticism and immediately try to defend themselves. They receive a provocation and respond in the same tone. This creates a cycle where the other person realizes, just press the right button and they react. And that's it. Control has been established. Better to be feared than loved in this context means not being easily triggered. It's not about coldness. It's about not giving away your emotional core for free. A practical example: someone makes a provocative comment in a conversation. Instead of responding immediately, you look, pause briefly, and respond calmly, or simply change the subject. This small delay completely breaks the expectation. You cease to be predictable. And predictability in the social game is a form of vulnerability. This is where the calculated use of force comes in. It's not about responding stronger, it's about responding better, or often not responding at all. But there's an even deeper point. The pause only works when it comes from a real place. If it's forced, it becomes theatrics, and the human brain perceives that. Therefore, everything returns to the internal point of reference. A man who depends on external validation feels an urgency to respond because he needs to prove himself. But the one who is anchored in himself is in no hurry. He chooses when and how to respond. That's virtue in action, dealing with the unpredictability of fortune. Want to start applying this today? Simple. Create the habit of never immediately responding to something emotional. Practice micro-pauses. At first, it will seem strange, almost uncomfortable, but it is precisely in this discomfort that control is born. And as this becomes natural, something interesting happens. It's not just the response time that changes, it's how you maintain yourself under pressure. And that's where most people truly reveal themselves. It's under pressure that the game truly begins. And it's also where most lose without realizing it. Because making mistakes doesn't destroy respect, but how someone reacts to a mistake does. When a man visibly collapses under a challenge, stuttering, speeding up, over-explaining or showing discomfort, he sends a clear signal. He can't carry his own weight. And the human brain registers this with brutal precision. As Niccolo Machiavelli taught, decisions based on real human nature always trump any beautiful ideal. And human nature respects stability, especially in moments of tension. The end justifies the means, and in this case, the means are not avoiding mistakes, but maintaining presence even when they happen. Imagine a presentation where something goes wrong. While one person panics, another simply pauses, breathes, and continues with fewer words. This second person, even failing, maintains authority because he doesn't negotiate his posture with the environment. Now there's a curious pattern. The more pressure there is, the more most people try to compensate by talking too much. It's almost automatic, as if words could regain control. But the opposite happens. Excessive talking under stress communicates a loss of focus. The dangerous man does the opposite. He slows down and reduces his composure. Fewer words, more presence. Better to be feared than loved here isn't about intimidation. It's about not becoming emotionally disorganized in front of others. A practical example: someone confronts you in public. Instead of responding hastily, you maintain eye contact, pause, and respond in a short sentence, that's all, without justifying, without elaborating. This behavior activates something in the other person: automatic respect, because few can maintain this level of control. It's the calculated use of force, not through intensity, but through precision. But there's a detail that almost no one notices. Maintaining composure under pressure isn't a spur-of-the-moment technique. It's a reflection of who you are internally. If inside there's dependence, fear of judgment, or a need for approval, it will leak out, especially under stress. And the leakage is subtle: micro-expressions, tone of voice, rhythm. Therefore, the real strategy isn't just acting differently. It's becoming someone who doesn't crumble easily. Virtù and fortuna come into play again. You don't control the external chaos, but you control your internal response. A simple and powerful exercise. When you feel pressure, instead of trying to react better, reduce everything. Talk less, move less, breathe more deeply. This reorganizes your system in real time, and the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. And it's at this point that an even finer difference emerges, because it's not enough to appear as if nothing affected you. The real question is this true or just a performance? Many people believe that appearing indifferent is a sign of strength, so they start acting cold, distant, almost impenetrable. But they forget a crucial detail. The human brain detects when this is an act. And when it is an act, the effect is exactly the opposite. Instead of respect, it generates distrust. Because there is an emotional leak, small involuntary signals that contradict the external posture. A look that lasts too long, a dry answer out of context, a heavy silence. All of this reveals effort. And effort, in this game, reveals weakness. As Niccolò Machiavelli taught, the appearance of virtue only works when it is consistent with perceived reality. Otherwise, it becomes a mask, and masks slip. The end justifies the means, but the means here is not to feign indifference. It is not needing to feign anything. Now, observe the difference between someone who is truly indifferent and someone who tries to appear so. The first person doesn't need to prove anything. They don't change their behavior to demonstrate detachment. They simply carry on. The second person, however, adjusts their tone, forces silence, artificially avoids eye contact. This creates a strange effect. People sense that something is wrong, even without being able to explain it. Better to be feared than loved, in this context, isn't about theatrical coldness. It's about genuine stability. A practical example: someone ignores you or devalues you. Performative indifference tries to show they didn't care. They change their posture, avoid overreacting. Real indifference, on the other hand, doesn't even engage in this game. They continue acting exactly as before, without altering their rhythm or energy. And this communicates much more, because there's no need for compensation. There's consistency. But here's the deepest point. You can only be truly indifferent when you're not emotionally dependent on the situation. And this comes back once again to the internal point of reference. Those who still seek external validation will always try to appear to be something, because deep down they feel they need to prove something. But those who are anchored within themselves don't perform. They simply are. Calculated use of force here means not wasting energy trying to convince anyone of your stance. It's emotional economy applied in practice. Want to test this? The next time something bothers you, instead of trying to appear indifferent, just don't change your behavior. Not more, not less. Maintain consistency. It's uncomfortable at first, but that's where authenticity begins to form. And as this solidifies, a new layer comes into play. Because it's not just about how you react, it's about how you approach it. Before any words are spoken, even before anyone decides to listen to you, your body has already spoken for you. The way a man crosses a threshold, a door, a corridor, a room, already writes a silent verdict. That's spatial dominance. And it has nothing to do with physical size, but with how you occupy the space. A man who enters too quickly, looking around, adjusting his clothes or trying to fit in, is, without realizing it, asking permission to exist. But the one who understands the logic of Niccolo Machiavelli acts differently. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. He doesn't wait for validation from the environment. He arrives with a defined internal point of reference. The end justifies the means, and here the means are simple: conscious physical presence, firm step, constant rhythm, stable gaze, not exaggerated, just solid. This completely changes how people perceive him, even in silence. Now, observe something curious. Dominant people don't try to occupy space. They naturally don't avoid occupying it. There's a huge difference. Those who try to appear large force gestures open their bodies too much, exaggerate movements. Those who truly maintain presence reduce excesses, fewer unnecessary movements, more intention. Better to be feared than loved in this context isn't about intimidation, but about not seeming out of place. A practical example: when entering a room, avoid immediately looking at everyone for approval. Instead, enter, choose a spot. Adjust your posture, and only then begin to interact. This slight delay communicates something powerful. You're not reacting to the environment, you're positioning yourself within it. It's the calculated use of force applied to the body. And the detail, nobody consciously notices it, but everyone feels it. But there's a common mistake that destroys all of this: the attempt to copy external behavior without adjusting the internal one. When someone tries to walk like a confident person without truly being centered, inconsistencies arise. The step becomes mechanical, the gaze loses naturalness, the body goes into conflict, and the human brain detects this quickly. Therefore, once again, everything comes back to the internal, virtu and fortuna. You control your action, but the environment reacts unpredictably. So the strategy is not to control the environment, it's to become stable enough not to be affected by it. A simple exercise: practice entering everyday environments, elevator, classroom, gym. Reduce your speed by 10%, align your posture and breathing before entering. This trains your system not to act impulsively, and as this becomes natural, a new test arises. Because it's not enough to enter well. The game continues when you receive a negative response. Few things expose a man as much as how he handles rejection. A no isn't just an answer, it's a trigger, and most fail precisely at that moment. Because without realizing it, they adjust their behavior immediately after the refusal, changing their tone, trying to negotiate, explaining themselves, or showing frustration. And this micro-adjustment communicates something clear: dependence. The human brain interprets it this way: this person needed this result to remain stable, and when someone needs something too much, they lose power. As Niccolo Machiavelli taught, decisions based on real human nature are what truly work. And the reality is simple: whoever cannot stand by a no cannot maintain authority. The end justifies the means. And here the means is not convincing the other person to say yes, but maintaining integrity even in the face of refusal. Now observe the behavior of someone who is emotionally anchored. They receive a no, and nothing changes. Not the tone, not the rhythm, not the posture. They don't try to regain approval at that moment. This creates a powerful effect. The other person realizes they don't have emotional control over them. Better to be feared than loved, in this context, isn't about being tough. It's about not being dependent. A practical example: you make a proposal and the person refuses. Instead of trying to save the situation, you simply reply, "Understood," and move on, without tension, without insistence. This type of response completely breaks the pattern, because most people try to recover lost value, and you simply don't play that game. This is calculated use of force, not insisting when insistence weakens you, but there's an even deeper layer. Many people even try to react well to a no, but internally they become disorganized, and this leaks out. A forced micro-smile, a subtle change in gaze, an uncomfortable pause. The body betrays what the mind tries to hide. Therefore, once again, the problem isn't the behavior, it's the internal dependence. Those who base their self-esteem on external results will always react to the environment. Those who possess a solid internal point of reference don't need to adjust anything. Virtù and fortuna appear again. You do your part, but you accept that the outcome is not under your control. Want to apply this? Start small. In simple situations, practice accepting a no without reacting emotionally, without trying to change, without justifying, without insisting. Just register it and move on. At first, it seems counterintuitive, but that's exactly what builds stability. And as this stability grows, a new risk arises, because many try to compensate for it by creating an artificial image of coldness. After understanding that reactivity and the need for approval weaken people, many make an almost inevitable mistake, trying to appear cold. They start talking less, reducing expressions, controlling their face, cutting off reactions. In theory, it seems right, but in practice, it creates a strange effect, because it's not natural, and the human brain detects this in seconds. There's a huge difference between someone who is stable and someone who is trying to appear stable. And that difference lies in the details, the timing of the response, the rigidity of the body, the overly hard gaze. All of this betrays effort, and effort in this context reveals insecurity. As Niccolo Machiavelli taught, the appearance of virtue only works when it doesn't seem constructed. The end justifies the means. But if the means are artificial, the result is lost. There's no point in trying to appear dangerous. You need to be unshaken. Now observe the behavior of someone who truly possesses emotional control. This person doesn't try to appear cold. They simply don't become disorganized. There's lightness, naturalness. They laugh when something is funny, speak when necessary, and assert themselves effortlessly. Better to be feared than loved. Here doesn't mean absence of emotion. It means absence of loss of control. A practical example. Someone makes a provocative joke. Forced coldness completely ignores it or reacts rigidly, creating an awkward atmosphere. Real control, however, might simply smile lightly and change the subject, or respond naturally without carrying tension. This demonstrates something much more powerful. You don't need to defend yourself. Calculated use of force in this case isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about not being dominated by it. But there's an even deeper point. Forced coldness stems from a fundamental error, the attempt to correct behavior without correcting the origin. The person realizes they overreact, so they try to overreact. But the impulse remains, just repressed. And repression generates inconsistency. At some point it leaks out. Therefore everything returns to the central point, the internal point of reference. Virtù and fortuna come into play once again. You control your actions, but you don't control the environment. So, instead of trying to control your image all the time, you strengthen your internal foundation. Want to apply this? Instead of trying to appear calm, focus on actually slowing down your breathing in moments of tension. The body follows the rhythm of the breath, and behavior follows the body. It's a slower path, but infinitely more solid. And when this foundation begins to form, an inevitable question arises. What is the root of all this? If you look closely, everything we've seen so far isn't an isolated problem, it's a symptom. The 4-second window, the need to justify oneself, the reactivity, the instability under pressure, the forced indifference, all of this stems from a single place, the absence of a solid internal point of reference. When a man doesn't validate himself internally, he inevitably becomes dependent on the environment to feel secure. And the problem is that the environment is constantly changing. People, situations, contexts. Nothing is stable. So he enters a cycle, adjusting behavior, trying to control perception, seeking approval. And in this process, he loses something fundamental: consistency. As Niccolo Machiavelli taught, decisions based on real human nature are the only effective path. And human nature respects those who don't waver with the environment. The end justifies the means. And the means here isn't appearing confident. It's not depending on external validation to remain stable. Now, what is this so-called internal point of reference? It's simple to understand, but difficult to build. It's when your perception of value doesn't change depending on the reaction of others. You can be rejected, criticized, ignored, and still remain the same. This isn't arrogance, it's stability. Better to be feared than loved in this context isn't about intimidation. It's about not bending emotionally to be accepted. A practical example: imagine 2 men presenting a project. One depends on approval. If he perceives disinterest, he starts to speed up, justify, try to regain attention. The other presents at the same pace from beginning to end, regardless of the reaction. Who do you think conveys more authority? This second man is operating with a defined internal center. He doesn't negotiate his energy with the environment. This is virtue applied in practice, dealing with the unpredictability of fortune. But here's the most important point. This kind of stability doesn't come from a quick technique. It's built, and it starts with small daily decisions, keeping the promises you make to yourself, even when no one is watching. Reducing behaviors you know are escapist, excessive validation, the need for immediate answers, attempts to please. Calculated use of force here is directed inward. It's emotional discipline. Want to start? Choose a simple area of your life, training, studying, routine, and stick to it regardless of motivation or recognition. This builds an inner sense of reliability, and the more you trust yourself, the less you need the world to confirm it. Constant adaptability ceases to be a reaction to the environment and becomes a conscious choice. And at that moment, something changes definitively. You stop trying to control how others see you and start controlling who you are. Now let me ask you a direct question. Looking at everything you've just seen, how many times have you lost respect without realizing it? How many times have you reacted too quickly, over-explained yourself, changed your behavior because of a no, or tried to appear as something you weren't? The hard truth is simple. As long as you depend on your environment to feel safe, your environment will continue to control you. And this isn't about a lack of ability, it's about a lack of awareness. As Niccolo Machiavelli would say, decisions based on real human nature are what separate those who lead from those who follow. So the question isn't, what do others think of you? The question is, who did you become in the first few seconds you were observed? Now, more important than understanding is applying. because knowledge without action becomes a comfortable illusion. So start simply. In the next interaction, slow down. Observe before reacting. Speak less. Maintain silence. Receive a no without adjusting your energy. Enter an environment as someone who doesn't need to prove anything. Small adjustments, but they completely change how you are perceived. Better to be feared than loved, not in the sense of fear, but in the sense of not being easily ignored. This is the calculated use of force. This is constant adaptability. This is building day after day, an internal point of reference that doesn't depend on applause, validation, or approval. And when that happens, something changes. You no longer chase respect. It begins to come naturally. But now I want to challenge you, for real. Are you going to continue reacting automatically? Or are you going to take control of how you are perceived? Are you going to continue trying to please? Or are you going to start asserting your own presence? Because in the end, the game was never about others. It was always about you. And if this content resonated with you, if at any point you saw yourself in it, then you already know you can't ignore it anymore. Now do this. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because here, you won't find empty motivation. You'll learn to play the game the way it really is.